June decisions may mean more than what you think to affect 2025-26 and beyond. USC football, of course, moving to the Big Ten and a different set of challenges. And certainly they are out there. And we will discuss both the here and now that USC is facing here in the 24 season. So we are going to continue our opponents series. We've got a feature on Penn State, of course, that one of the primary matchups for the Trojans coming up this fall. But of course, we continue to look ahead because we're in the midst of recruiting season. Appreciate you all being here at Trojan Conquest live right here at the Voice of College Football. We do this each and every Monday night, 10 Eastern, 7 where it counts. Matt Zemek's here, of course, Trojans Wire. Tim Prangley, of course, also Trojans Wire. We appreciate Matt and Tim making things go here at the Voice of College Football. Guys, how are we doing tonight?
Doing good. It's another Monday, right? It's getting ready for the news cycle for the week. USC had a really great recruiting weekend. Just coming off of that, got another, I guess, silent commit, with another emoji. So, which in my opinion is a good thing, because as soon as you come out loud, especially all these guys are out of state, the last thing you want to do is start splashing who's going to commit to your school, and then they get the full court press. So I'm excited. The names coming in the last 3 weeks, well, 3 of the last 4 weeks coming into USC, the who's who basically of defense, especially this last weekend. You can't, if you're a Trojan fan, you can't be more excited about the level of attraction that this defensive staff is bringing to the campus.
So to extend on that point, are you excited about the number of elite or quality defensive players that have USC in that final 4 or 5?
It's very rare these days when you see a guy out there that USC has actually recruited for not to have them in their final list. It's not every single one, but there's a huge swath of these top highly prized recruits, and it's weird. It'll be like 3 SEC schools and then USC, right? I mean, it's like USC's name is being thrown, and a big part of that is what Danton Lynn and what Coach Henderson are doing, just bringing a lot of attention to the program. Doug Belk's a name that carries a lot of weight as well, and I'm really excited. We're going to see what pops over the next couple of weeks. A lot of these recruits are pretty much done now with their official visits. Now it's time for them to make some decisions, and the recruiting season is going to look a little bit clearer by the end of this month when a lot of these big names start making decisions.
To set you up, Matt, I'll say it this way. During the season, we have something called the standings, the win-loss record. And we can just clearly say, okay, 2-0 is good, 4-1. Okay. We can make the evaluation just based on the wins and losses. And of course, that can be even skewed in certain directions. But the beauty, but also the frustration of college football in particular, with this long off season and the recruiting being what it is and the transfer portal, is the perception. So you've got the reality, which is, of course, where we're trying to arrive in our evaluation of this football team and this football program. And then you have the perception, which can fluctuate all over the place depending on certain signals. And then how much does that perception creep into reality and affect reality? That remains to be seen as well.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating confluence of circumstances when you think about it. I wrote a couple weeks ago that, the lack of big splash announcements, in terms of June recruiting was not anything for USC fans to worry about. But then came Justice Terry and Isaiah Gibson. And obviously one of the things that gets fed into the narrative, and this does not mean that the narrative is fair or that it's accurate, but we all know narratives can affect perceptions from recruits, from journalists, various people outside the inner sanctum of the program. And it's worth wondering. I don't have a strong opinion on this, but it's worth just putting out the question. Is the narrative surrounding USC unfair, though it might be? And I know Tim definitely thinks it's an unfair narrative, that Lincoln Riley doesn't take defense seriously. There are certain things that this program just, isn't very grown up about. That is an unfair narrative for Tim, and I think for a lot of USC diehards. But is that narrative, as wrong as it might be, affecting perceptions? Like, did that in any way nudge Justice Terry or Isaiah Gibson the wrong way, in addition to, a little NIL bag. Is that affecting what we're seeing? And with Tim's point about the silent commits, isn't that a sad commentary in a way? Like, oh, we can't just announce our commitments because, well, commitments really aren't commitments, until you sign on the dotted line. Why do we even have something called a commitment when a commitment really isn't a commitment? If you can just be swayed, if you can just blow in the wind, we've had Georgia folks tell us these past couple of weeks at USC, oh, bless your heart, you didn't really think you would hold on to those guys, did you? Oh, forgive us for thinking a commitment actually meant something, right? I mean, this discourse is really dumb. And to me, as someone, again, who's never spent a lot of time or energy on recruiting, come on, folks, can't we just have a system where you visit whoever you want, however many times you're allowed to, and then after every visit, then you make a commitment, and that's it. No takebacks. And there's a parallel here with the Isaiah Rakes situation, right? He exploited that loophole where you can't play for an SEC program if you're transferring from another SEC program. So Rakes used USC as a way station, an in-between pivot point from A&M. Then he goes to USC in the winter, and then he goes to Auburn in the spring. I mean, first off, why was that loophole not closed off? But secondly, I am as big a player freedom advocate as there is. It's great that we have a transfer portal. It's great that we have freedom of movement. But I don't think this was how it was supposed to be, where you transfer twice in the same off season. If we're going to say that there's at least some semblance of academic integrity, that this is still about getting an education in addition to pursuing an NFL career, then you shouldn't be allowed to transfer twice in the same off season. All the compliance people, the people in administrative academic positions at different universities having to waste hours of their lives, billable hours, to shuffle paperwork and get things straightened up. That spits in the face of academic integrity. So, and people have said, in terms of academic integrity and, the process and all that other stuff, oh, we can't have a transfer portal moved from December back to January because we have to get these kids enrolled. We have to have an academic process here. But of course, if you have the transfer portal in December, coaches are getting hired and fired. How can you even have time as a coaching staff to properly line up your transfer portal goals? So, there are a lot of aspects of this system that are really, really broken. And again, one of them is that a commitment really doesn't mean a commitment. So USC apparently has to do these silent commitments to prevent an outside school from swooping in and plucking them. And so, this is all confusing what's real, what's real and what's not, where programs actually stand and where perception stands, and how that all blends together at USC and various other schools across the country. So it's a really interesting and layered and very complicated conversation to have.
You brought it up twice. I brought up the point about silent commit for a reason. One, there are NCAA rules. The USC cannot announce. If a kid says, I'm coming, they cannot announce the names. So it's not a conscious choice by USC not to release the names. However, it's been a strategy in the past where the staff might say to them, hey, I know you're coming, but let's keep this little intrigue. Why that's not? Because we're going for out-of-state commits. And I don't care who the coach, when Pete Carroll was the coach, it's really tough to land somebody in Georgia, right, in the heart of SEC country, and then have them commit to you. And we saw what happens. They don't go after just the kids, Mark. They go after the families. They start promising the family stuff. It's a dirty business. So a little cloak and dagger, I'd call it more just strategy. Why do you want to blast out there and make this kid a target? Why not let them enjoy the process? And there's no need. I think that the recruiting services are the ones that push these kids to commit. I think they're the ones that push these kids out and really make a target to circus whole thing, because we don't sign until December, And just like everybody, you're trying to find content, trying to find something to talk about. But at the end of the day, really, all these kids can commit right now. None of it means anything until Well, and like I said before, I've been saying for weeks now, even when they do sign on the dotted line, we're seeing kids go through spring ball like Jay Toya and say, I'm out. You know what I mean? It doesn't, none of this stuff matters anymore, really. It's almost like we glorify it, but it's so fluid. A kid that signs, what is a recruiting class anymore? Is it what we want to be on our team in the fall? I mean, is it possibly who might be here in 2 years? A recruiting class these days is so fluid that it almost is starting to lose the significance, because the roster turnover from year to year, the players, you see it, not just, it used to be just the disgruntled kids that weren't getting playing time would bounce for better pastures, right? Now it's kids are looking for better situations everywhere. Why? Because you don't sit out anymore. So recruiting for me, this is just one of the many reasons why recruiting for me, it's great, it's fun. It's like if people are into soap operas, it's like man soap opera is all it really is. And it's these guys that are hanging their emotions on the decisions of 17, 18, and 19-year-old kids, and letting their week be ruined because some kids said they're going here, now they're going there. I don't know. I got to say that you might want to look at your priorities.
I technically agree with what you're saying, Tim, because everything that you just said, I completely, again, agree with. But I would need to have somebody run the numbers to let us know how many decommits there are in the transfer portal age versus what there was before. And nobody's willing to do that. And that's an exhaustive exercise. And to really track this so that we can come back and say, yes, technically, none of it matters. You can decommit, you can flip, you can do whatever you want. You can transfer in the spring during your freshman year and never step on the field for that team. All of that is completely true. But if most of those commitments are still followed through on, whatever the percentage is, 60%, 80%, 22%, I don't know. I could take a pretty logical guess, but I would like to see the numbers, because then I would say, Tim, everything you just said is technically true. However, 62% of the commitments are still coming through and they're signing and playing at that school at least for a year.
For sure. And I'm not saying it's not none of them. It's not even a vast majority of them. But we would all say here, a significant portion of these kids move between.
It's increased
the
considerably.
day, and I think it's going to go up. I think it was Walker Lamer said these kids have agents. Yeah, I mean, some of them actually have agents now in high school, and then it's crazy. And you're looking at it's going to increase. And what we knew, I mean, I'm going to be that old guy saying, "Oh God, remember when?" But I do. You remember those February signing days? That the fun of all of that is completely gone now. Because when you did get that letter of intent, for better or for worse, it was kind of horrible because you kind of trapped that kid. But the kid was trapped, meaning that kid was going to be pretty much on your team. Because if they're those top recruits we're talking about, they're going to be productive, right? They're not going to get up and leave within a year. Why? Because they want to be out in 3. So why are they going to have that movement and risk that? If they got a good situation, they're pretty much going to stay where they are. And also, if they're not happy, they're less likely to bounce in the first chance. If they get to spring camp and they're, let's say, 3rd on the depth chart, they're not just going to bounce right away. Why? Because they don't want to sit out a whole year. So I think that recruiting is fun. Recruiting is these services do a very good job. But another thing people are missing on the boat here on is it's not like it's science. And if you go back and you look at less than half of the guys that are quote unquote 5 stars get drafted in the NFL.
Yeah, but that's still like 3 to 4 times more than the 4-star.
But the people, all those people that lost that, half of those 5 stars that didn't make the NFL lost their minds is what I'm talking about, Mark. I'm not saying percentage wise and numbers wise, right? Yes. But I'm talking about the fan bases. So and so. I mean, I remember literally, this is true. People, this is back in the day with when Clay Helton was there. If Helton can land, so and so, then we're going to be happy. And if he can't, then this is that blah blah blah. And they hinged what the coaching staff was doing based on these horrible. I think even Helton had like a number 5 recruiting class. It was filled with a bunch of skill guys, no linemen, but everyone was kind of happy because they were getting all of these 5 stars and 4 stars, and they were studs, and they did go off to the NFL. But the teams weren't winning. Why? Because it wasn't a well-rounded class. And so even though they were finishing high in these recruiting rankings, or big one. I remember Corey Foreman. People were losing their minds when Corey Foreman wasn't getting picked up by USC. And they're saying, "Oh, I can't believe this is happening." And not to disparage the kid. I hope he just goes off this year. Is it Fresno State, I think? But I mean, I hope he goes to the NFL. He has a great career, but people were losing their minds at USC might miss out on this guy. Generational player. We lose this guy. You know, the services were hyping him as the best player in the country. If we lose him, it's all over our own backyard. And then nothing.
This would be a great exercise to go through each recruiting class starting about 2022, I would say, and just go back through them and pinpoint what happened to that guy, what happened to that guy, what happened to that guy, what happened to that guy.
Well, you could go to if you go to the USC site on 247, on the bottom is a ribbon of what they say are the best recruits all time at USC. And if you look at that ribbon of the best recruits of all time at USC, it's a who's who of a lot of people that didn't quite live up to their billing. Yeah. And then you look, where's Reggie Bush? Where's, where's Lofa Tatupu? Where's Troy Polamalu? Where are these guys? And they're not on that list. But at the top of the 247 list, there's a bunch of guys that, well, I mean, they were good players. They're great Trojans. I'm not disparaging them, but they certainly shouldn't be the top rated guys. So I want to say, back up a little bit, you guys, when you freak out well, this guy's a 5-star and this guy's just a 4-star. I mean, let them have their careers. And the one thing that this staff is talking about is development. And why do you think Utah plays out of their mind? Utah's not full of 4- and 5-star guys, but they have been developing. They have a plan. They have a culture there, and they develop their players, and they win. So I'm not saying USC should go that route. I'm not saying that, but when I hear people freaking out about this guy's a 5-star, he's a 4-star. Hey, but this lineman's only a 3-star. It just, people get hung up on these stars way too much, and I think it's time to slow down and actually look at the play on the field.
True. In volume, it matters, though. Those star rankings matter.
I know the shell game, how it works. I understand.
They do. They just do. That cannot. I get into this argument all the time with people that call in and discuss this with me. And I'm not a recruiting guy, but I can do math.
If you do the raw massive numbers across and say, well, this percentage is a higher percentage. Okay,
we don't know about any individual 5-star that's going to turn out, or a 3-star that's going to be JJ Watt, who was a 2-star and turned out to be one of the greatest players of all time. Yes,
that part is true, Mark. That part is true. But I'm saying I've seen full classes go through schools, I don't know, say USC, and then they're losing 5, 6, 8. But the recruiting stars said this, we should be winning. There's a lot more that goes into it.
If you take the top 6 rated talent composite teams from the college football playoff era, they basically define the college football playoff era.
It's a well-developed argument. Yes. You're right. Stars matter 100%.
In volume, they do matter.
I know, but you only get a finite amount. Sure, if you could pick 100 swath and say, well, we'll take the top 30% of them, then yeah, it's a great argument. But a recruiting class is only X amount of scholarships. So that big number you're talking about, it doesn't, when you break it down to the amount of picks you get out of that big swath, you're playing a numbers game, but it doesn't mean that you're going to have a great class because you have this guy ranked here and this guy ranked there. Especially when it comes down to, well, where are they? This guy's a number 100 player. This guy's a number 300 player. That's when it really starts getting silly. You take a top 50 player, that guy's going to be a stud. You start getting into the weeds on the 3-star and 4-star people. That's why I think there's a lot of guesswork going on.
Well, whether the chicken comes before the egg, and we've had that discussion as well, whether the offers and the coaches' evaluations are pushing the rankings, or the rankings are causing them to, as coaches and scouts, to go look at those players. I don't care. I just know that the end result is pretty damn accurate. It just is.
A lot of busts. I bet you can go through, if you did your Ohio State list of all those high guys you thought were going to be really great players. I don't know, even like a receiver that was a 5-star that's now over on Penn State. We could talk about that later on as well. Who's a solid contributor. Most of them don't.
It's like if you threw the best teams in the country all in the SEC, somebody's got to lose games. They can't all come through. But the recruiting rankings are extremely accurate. Yes,
you just said extremely accurate. Did you ever think that maybe they, as you get, if you ever noticed when some guys go to certain schools, their rankings slowly go up. So then if you have guys who go to Alabama and then they're going to win, then you go, hey, look all these all these guys who put our 5 stars went to Alabama, won a national championship.
And what was my last point?
Has nothing with development or coaches or the fact that it's Alabama and Nick Saban. It's just that they went there. So these 5 stars went to Alabama. Therefore, the system's perfect.
And my most recent point was, I'm not telling you that they arrive at that ranking legitimately. I'm just telling you however they arrive at that ranking, it's accurate. It is by and large accurate.
Yeah, the final rankings that are a lot more accurate.
Final rankings. And I understand. I bet if I look in the chat right now, there are going to be all sorts of aberrations. People are going to be picking out examples from 2016 and all over the place. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about in mass.
Roger, open your freaking ears. When on earth did I say that? This is the things I love to hear. This is the stuff. Roger, when did I say that I've accepted it? I'm happy we lost 5 stars. Work on the listening. Work on your listening, Roger. That's embarrassing.
We are going to talk some Penn State football, and of course, one of the marquee matchups in the Big Ten this year, and a game that I am looking forward to immensely is USC's date at the Rose Bowl against Penn State. And of course, they played an epic Rose Bowl after the 2016 season, 52-49, Saquon Barkley and Sam Darnold, of course, dueling until that final Trace McSorley interception and field goal by USC. We have just clicked in Marty Leap from Penn State Rivals. Why is he not here? I just clicked him in. What's going on? This did this last time. Marty, can you hear us?
I can hear you guys. There we go.
Hey, Marty, how you doing?
Good. How are you guys?
Well, we're having fun, Marty. We're having fun like we always are, Marty.
Good to see you, Marty. Thanks for being here.
Yep.
This is Tim and this is Matt. They write for Trojan's Wire, and they hold down the fort here at the Voice of College Football on our USC channel. So we do this each and every Monday night, and Matt and Tim do a call-in show on Fridays. So this is Marty Leap. We bring him on a consistent basis to talk Penn State. You can join him, folks, on Rivals. Speaking of recruiting. I'll get us ramped up on this one, and then I will allow Matt and Tim to take the questions after this one. I'm going to throw it out there because I have started my deep dive on all the various preseason publications, and Drew Aller is rated by Phil Steele as the not the fourth best quarterback in the country, the 4th best NFL prospect at quarterback. And of course, many people hinge the season on one Drew Aller, and it's a lot more complicated than that. But Marty, why don't we start right there with your evaluation of Drew Aller that I've heard a few times, of course.
Yeah, I mean, excuse me, forgive the voice. I know Mark knows this, but we had the Pony baseball team I coached. We had a doubleheader tonight, so there was a lot of yelling and screaming and coaching going on. But yeah, Drew has all the tools. All the tools. If he winds up a first-round pick, if he winds up the first quarterback off the board next year, I'm not going to be surprised. I mean, Christian Hackenberg, who is, people always make the lazy comparison, which is very lazy to make because Drew last year was much better than Hackenberg was in his sophomore junior season. Was a 50th overall or whatever it was by the Jets because people sold the tools. NFL teams think they can fix these guys. And with Drew, I'm not sure how much quote-unquote fixing there actually is to be done. I think the change in offense coordinator is going to go a long way for him this year. But yeah, it wouldn't surprise me to see it happen. He's got the tools. There's no doubt about it. He's got the arm. He's got the size. You know, you go back to some of the throws he has made. I mean, his first ever game coming off the bench at Purdue on a Thursday night in the season opener when that place was fired up. I mean, as you two, Matt and Tim, may unfortunately come to learn over the years, Purdue at home in primetime is called the spoiler makers for a reason. That is just, no matter how bad they are, it is a tough place to play at night for some reason. And he came in cold off the bench when Sean Clifford was hurt and proceeded to make 2 throws that very few quarterbacks in college football are going to make, let alone when you're an 18-year-old freshman stepping on the field for the first time on the road in a hostile environment. The tools are there. There's no doubt about it. He needs to be better. I know, Mark, last time I was on, you and I even discussed, if you look the stats from last year, his stats don't even necessarily need to improve. He needs to, if he had the exact same stats as he did last year, but you take his stat line against say like Maryland and Ohio State and flip them, and Penn State still beats Maryland, but still loses to Ohio State, you look at him completely differently because you're going to say, hey, yeah, Drew came out and played a great game. They just didn't get the job done. So I think his overall stats don't really need to improve. He just needs to be better against those top tier opponents. He needs to be better when they go to USC. He needs to be better when Ohio State comes to Beaver Stadium. He needs to be better when they go to Camp Randall, which will probably be a night game. And if he does that and continues to have these tools, the arm, obviously his size isn't going to change. I mean, his footwork is not anything terrible. Like it's not something that really needs done. His pocket presence is pretty decent. And I also think last year he was hurt immensely by the fact his wide receivers just could not get open. The wide receiver room was terrible. They couldn't get separation, and that hurt him as well. But yeah, I'm not going to be surprised at all if this time next year we're talking about Drew getting ready to start for someone as a rookie after being selected in the first round.
So Marty, here at USC, as you know, we've had a run of really bad defensive coordinators: Clancy Pendergast, Todd Orlando, and then, of course, Mr. Grinch. And we're excited that things are going to turn around under Danton Lynn. You've had a run of offensive coordinators who have struggled, haven't been able to live up to the Joe Moorhead standard, the guy who was able to put all the pieces together, create that Rose Bowl team that Mark mentioned just a short while ago when he introduced you in our Penn State segment here tonight. So what do you think about the latest offensive coordinator, and what are Penn State fans and analysts thinking in terms of, is this likely to be the guy who puts it all together in ways that the past few offensive coordinators in Happy Valley have not managed to do?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of excitement, around Andy Koldenicki. Now, I'll preface that by saying there was a lot of excitement when Mike Yurcich was hired, right? Yurcich came to Penn State with a great track record with what he had done all over the place, especially Oklahoma State. When the offense coordinator before him, Kirk Shiraka, when Shiraka was hired, Yurcich is who James Franklin wanted, and Texas offered more money. And then there was the coaching change at Texas, and Franklin was able to get him, and he fired Shiraka after 1 year. So I'll preface it with that. But yeah, I think Koldenicki, one thing that he does really well is he does a great job of building his offense around what he has. Now, that said, Andy Koldenicki wants to run a lot of 12 and 22 personnel as well. What are the two strongest position groups on Penn State's offense? Running back and tight end. So it works out really well where this is a guy who does a great job of building his offense around what he has. But at the same time, Penn State's offense is built to be run the way he would preferably like to run an offense. I from watching a lot of his stuff this offseason when he was at Kansas, even going back to Buffalo, he does a great job of never letting the safeties get comfortable. He tacks safeties, keeps them on their heels, and that has a trickle-down effect to the rest of the defense. Now, obviously, the defenses in the Big Ten are much better than what he faced in the Big 12. But the guy can coach football. I have no doubts about it. I remember when I was actually at a game between the Steelers and the Packers when Mike Yurcich was fired, and when I saw the text message, my buddy who texted me, I texted him back immediately, and I literally told him, said, don't remember the guy's name, go hire Kansas offense coordinator. And sure enough, it worked out. But I think the expectations are very high. Again, I think it's a good mix where with what Koldenicki wants to do, Penn State's built to do, he also does a great job of building his offense around what he has. And that was something that Mike Yurcich struggled with. I know when Yurcich was hired, one of the things people were really worried about was his lack of usage of tight ends in the past. And going back to Mike Gesicki almost 10 years ago now, Penn State's been on a heater at tight end. And people were worried, like, hey, he's got this great tight end room. Will he utilize it? And he really didn't. And when he was fired last year, there were some comments by James Franklin made of, hey, they asked him what was different because the offense became much more explosive after Yurcich was fired. And he made a comment along the lines of, we're letting guys do what they do best instead of us trying to make them be something they're not. Something along those lines. It was definitely a shot at Yurcich for, square peg, round hole kind of stuff. And that's something I don't expect with Koldenicki either. So I think there's a lot of excitement there. I think expectations are tempered because as much as there's excitement, as good as his running back room and tight end room is, as much potential as Drew Aller has, both your starting tackles, I mean, obviously everybody knows Olu Fashanu, but Caden Wallace, who's been a 4-year starter at right tackle, was a 3rd-round pick. That's tough to replace, losing both tackles who went that high in the NFL draft. The wide receiver room still has a lot of question marks. So I think that, expectations are tempered when you keep that in mind, but I think people, myself included, expect Koldenicki to be able to do a really good job of utilizing what Penn State has to really improve. And I think the biggest change that I expect to see is that explosive running game they had in 2022 when they beat Utah in the Rose Bowl. That was really the bread and butter of the offense that wasn't there much of the year last year. I expect that to be back this year with Andy Koldenicki as long as the offensive line does their job.
You talked about Andy Koldenicki, and when we opened up, talked about Drew Aller. And when I think of Drew Aller, when he was coming in, I thought he was the kind of guy with the vertical passing game, just going deep, and unleashing him. But it did seem that Yursich kind of put the clamps on that a little bit. I'd like to see him throw the ball down the field a little bit more. Losing Keandre Lambert-Smith, kind of a blow to that, right? Taking the lid off the top. But do you guys feel that you have the receiving core to do that? I know Julian Fleming came in, but he's what, Mark? He's probably more of a possession receiver guy that he is, the kind of guy that's going to get you that down the field shot. What is your because I think one of the strengths of our SC team is our secondary. What do you have as far as your receivers that can open the game up for you guys? Because I know you guys are going to run the ball. Clearly, right, with your backs, you're going to run the ball. But do you have that component? If we decide that we want to kind of crash down on you a little bit, put the guys in the box to make USC play a little more even, a little more keep us fair.
One guy to watch there, his name's Amari Evans. He's going to be a true junior, arguably the fastest player on the team. His freshman year in 2022, he was used for that. Hey, take the top off the defense, even sometimes just as a decoy and open things up underneath. And then last year, Yursich didn't use it. He tried to use him in the slot and just stuff he wasn't fit for. And then it was not the game after Yursich was fired, but 2 games later against Michigan State, where Drew just threw an absolute beautiful deep ball to a wide open Evans for like a 75-yard gain. And I think you're going to see a lot of that with Evans this year. Like you said, Drew has the ability to throw that deep ball. We've seen it at times, but last year, I almost wonder, this was something we kind of discussed in Penn State circles last year. Penn State's defense, and I came on here and said a bunch more, that was the best Penn State defense I've ever seen in my entire life. Statistically, based off of yards per play, that was the best defense in college football since I believe 2011 or 2012 Alabama. That defense was really freaking good. And I wonder if having that defense mixed with a first-year starter at quarterback caused this coaching staff to get too conservative because they knew that with their defense that they could play a more conservative style of offense. And then when they would try to open it up, Drew had this conservative style so smashed into his head. It was tough for him to open it up. Receivers weren't getting open. I think it really was kind of just a perfect storm of problems that occurred. Now, this year, wide receiver, you mentioned losing Keandre Lambert-Smith. Immensely talented, and also an immense handful in the locker room in a lot of ways. And honestly, I think Julian Fleming, he was brought in before Keandre Lambert-Smith transferred. But I think Fleming was brought in as much as anything for his downfield blocking, because in this offense, it's going to be important, and to be a leader in that wide receiver room. It was a young wide receiver room that really lacked maturity, really lacked leadership. And from the second Fleming has gotten on campus, the biggest thing that has been said is how much he handles himself like a professional, because he came in from the best wide receiver room in the country. He brought that work ethic and that mentality with him. And I think that has trickled down to a lot of these other receivers. Some other guys are going to play big roles. Trey Wallace is super talented, was expected to have a big year last year, caught 6 or 7 balls for like 80 yards against WVU in the opener, caught a touchdown week 2 against Delaware, and then got hurt and was just like unheard of the rest of the year. And I think Penn State's offense missed him a lot more than anybody ever realized it going to. Liam Clifford, Sean's little brother, another name to watch. It's like the stereotypical slot white dude wide receiver. He's just the possession guy, going to move the sticks, catch the ball. But it's what he is. And I think Caden Saunders, a former top 100 recruit out of Ohio, who really started to seem like he was kind of putting it together last year towards the end of the year, had a good spring, could be another guy to watch. But there's talent in the receiver room. And I think that's what makes this so frustrating, is it's not a lack of talent. There's a lot of highly rated kids, and there's a lot of kids who've shown a lot of really good things, but just kind of need to get it together behind the scenes. And they're hoping Julian Fleming can help with that. And if that does happen, that'll go a long way for this offense, because this offense they don't need to be throwing for 300 yards a game. As long as that threat's there once or twice a game to take the top off on the deep ball, that's going to force defenses to play their safeties back and make it easier to run the ball. So they don't need to be a super talented passing team. They just got to be more explosive. And I think the parts are there to do it. It's just a matter of players going out and executing.
All right. So, over at Ohio State, the conversation with Coach Ryan Day is, can he beat Michigan? At Penn State, the conversation with James Franklin is, can he beat Michigan or Ohio State? And a typical Penn State season, as most folks around here at the Voice of College Football are quite aware of, is that James Franklin will give you 10-2, but the 2 are against Michigan and Ohio State. How many kinds of those seasons does the Penn State fan base is the Penn State fan base willing to accept from James Franklin? Like, if that's 2024, 2025, 2026, is that good enough?
It's a very loaded kind of question for a lot of reasons, but let me start with, they've lost 3 in a row against Michigan. Yes. Before that, James had won 4 of his last 5 against Michigan. The James Franklin can't beat Michigan narrative has always driven me insane, because until Michigan had 3 straight teams that won the Big Ten, went to the college football playoff, and then won a national title, he'd won 4 out of 5. So that, and I think with Harbaugh being gone, I think Penn State and Michigan are on a lot more level footing. That said, I get what you're saying, and a lot of Penn State fans will say the same thing. I would come back with 2 things. One, in the 12-team playoff era, 10-2 in the Big Ten, especially a school the caliber of Penn State, you're probably getting in. If they would have had the 12-team playoff this entire time, dating back to 2016, Penn State would have been in the playoff every year except for 2 of them. Also, there's a lot of people in and out of Penn State circles who still view Penn State as the program it was in the 70s, the 80s, and through most of the 90s. From 2000 until James Franklin arrived, the norm at Penn State was 9-3, 8-4. They had like 3 or 4 seasons in there where they went 4-8. They had 1 or 2 seasons they didn't win a game in the Big Ten. James Franklin has done a tremendous job at Penn State. I'm not sure Penn State has much higher of a ceiling as a program for a lot of reasons, especially in today's college football, than what James Franklin has done. So I don't fault any fan for getting frustrated with this. I get frustrated with it sometimes, but at the end of the day, you've got to ask yourself, is there any coach in the country who is a slam dunk better head coach than James Franklin that you're going to get at Penn State? Because I don't think there is. I think if you look at the guys who are clearly ahead of him, it's the Kirby Smarts, it's, Lincoln Riley, it's Steve Sarkisian, guys who aren't leaving where they're at, So I think that's part of it as well. But I think if the bottom totally would fall out, like, I think if they don't make the playoff this year, and it's not because of injury, I think he is under a lot of pressure going into next year because this schedule is not challenging. You don't play Michigan, you don't play Oregon. You got to go to Wisconsin, but I don't think Wisconsin is going to be anything too terribly challenging this year. Even if you want to chalk that Ohio State game up as a loss, other than when they come out to the Coliseum to play USC, and obviously USC is going to have their own litany of questions this year. And I mean, you guys know this better than me, but I feel like in the trenches, they're really going to struggle year 1 in the Big Ten. Even if you lose that game, if you're 10-2 and those are your 2 losses, especially because if you do lose that game, USC probably did put together a really strong year, you probably still win the playoff. So I do think if they miss it because they lost 3 or 4 games, it's not because of a litany of injuries or something, then there's a lot of pressure on him going into next year. But at the same time, man, if he's just going to continue to win 10 games, especially now at the 12-team playoff, that's going to get you in most years. I just have a hard time seeing a scenario where Penn State does better. Again, the guys who are definitely better than James Franklin are guys who are not leaving the jobs they're at.
Well, we know what Allen and Singleton are going to do. They've proven what they are. Could you just talk to our fans? Tell us about your offensive lines. We know that run game is great. You could have all the backs you want without those big dudes up front making those holes for your backs. Doesn't matter how good they are. Just who have you lost? Who do you have, and who do we need to keep an eye on?
Yeah, like I said earlier, they're definitely replacing a lot along the offensive line. Poshin is the big one. Caden Wallace was a 3rd-round pick of the Patriots. Hunter Norzad, who was a center the last 2 years, was a 5th-round pick of the Chiefs. I mean, there's a lot of bodies there, and a lot of guys I like a lot, and a lot of guys with starting experience. One thing that kind of proved to be a blessing in disguise and was wild because they won all their games in this scenario anyway. Down the stretch in 2022, their offensive line got decimated by injuries, and yet they just kept winning games, largely because outside of Utah, they didn't play anybody worth a lick in their last 5 or 6 games. But a lot of young guys got a lot of experience. So Drew Shelton's going to step into left tackle. Drew Shelton started the last 5 or 6 games that 2022 season, including the Rose Bowl, played a lot last year in reserve. He's got a ton of experience. Your interior offensive line, you're bringing back JB Nelson, who was a starter last year until he got dinged coming down the end. You bring back Vegaone, who was a starter last year, or played starter reps, I should say. At center, you have a 5th-year senior, Nick Dawkins, who's been around, probably going to be a team captain. Also in the interior, you have an incoming 5-star offensive lineman, Cooper Cousins, who is probably the most college-ready offensive lineman they've ever brought into the Franklin area. He's going to play a ton. And at right tackle, you feel really good because you've got Anthony Donka, who last year was thrown to the Wolves against Ole Miss in the Peach Bowl. First time he ever played right tackle in his life, and played extremely well. They were extremely high on him. You have Nolan Rucci, who was a 5-star recruit who transferred in from Wisconsin. And when he came to Penn State, the kind of word behind the scenes in the last building was, hey, Wisconsin didn't develop him fully, and there's some more development there. And he's been on campus since January. He's put on like 18 pounds of muscle. So, 5-star kid who's taken to the strength conditioning program like that, you feel good. And behind them, you have Javen Williams, who's a redshirt freshman, who's also a former 5-star recruit, who word was last year towards the second half of the year that light was really starting to go on for him in practice. So while there's not a ton of necessarily starting experience up there, like I said, because of injuries, they've got a lot of guys who have played a lot of football still and who they're very high on. So I think the offensive line might take some lumps early in the year until they kind of mesh and gel as a group. But I don't think it'll be as good as last year's offensive line, but I still think it'll be an above average line. And to build off that real quick, Matt, sorry not to cut you off, but this is going to be a group that's going to be really, really good at just road grading, drive you into the ground and run the ball down your throat kind of blocking. And that's what this offense is going to want to do. So I think that's a big factor too.
So Marty, you know that USC, we had a big defensive coordinator change in the offseason. And, a year ago, I felt that if there was any way for Lincoln Riley to bring aboard Jim Leonard and sack Alex Grinch, he should have tried to do it. And when it became apparent in early November, late October, that Grinch was not going to survive into 2024, we did our USC defensive coordinator big board. And after Jim Leonard, second on my big board was Tom Allen. I'm a big Tom Allen guy, very impressed with his body of work as a defensive mind at Indiana. Of course, his familiarity with the Big Ten, obvious selling point on the defensive coordinator market for USC. But as it turned out, USC got Danton Lynn, whom I really like, but I do think, because I've gone on record saying it, that Tom Allen would have been an even better choice for USC defensive coordinator. So where does Tom Allen go? He goes to Happy Valley. What are you seeing? What are you observing from Tom Allen as he takes over for Manny Diaz under James Franklin?
It's funny you mentioned that, because last year when the season was starting, a lot of us in Penn State circles talking like, all right, defense can be great. Manny's probably becoming a head coach. Who's top of our big board? And we're like, well, Tom Allen's probably gonna get fired. So let's put Tom. And it's like you. He knows the Big Ten. And the big thing with me with Tom Allen, he had really good defenses in Indiana without a lot of talent. You give him the talent he's going to have at Penn State, or he would have had at USC, and it's easy to see the excitement, right? So, yeah, I expect the defense, it's going to take a step back. There's no way this defense is as good as it was last year, especially when you lost the first-round pick at edge rusher. You lost another edge rusher who went in the top 50 picks in Adiza Isaac. You lost a lot of talent from that group, but they're still really, really good. Tom Allen knows this conference. His defense is not that different from Manny Diaz's. Very aggressive, very attacking. So these guys already have that mindset. And again, I'm sure this isn't coincidental. Similar to the Koldernicki stuff and some of the personnel, Tom Allen likes to use a third safety as his Sam linebacker. Penn State safety room, probably the deepest spot on this defense outside of defensive tackle. So again, I'm sure that's not a coincidence. I'm sure those are things that were factors when Franklin made the hire. But yeah, I think fans are excited about Tom Allen. He's a guy that really for a few years now, Penn State fans, I think even when Manny first got hired, if you kind of sat back and go, right, ideal scenario, Manny has 2 really good years and gets a head coaching job. Who's your guy? And like, well, by then Tom Allen's probably on the hot seat at Indiana. So yeah, I think it's a great hire. I think he'll do really well. But I will say Danton Lynn, when he left UCLA to go to USC, that was one the Penn State fans didn't like, because I mean he's a Penn State letterman. He was a great corner here. And he was a guy who I think when Tom Allen was first hired, people were like, all right, well, Tom Allen, 1 or 2 good years, goes back to being head coach. We'll go pluck Danton Lynn from UCLA and bring him home. And obviously with the money he's going to make at USC in the program, it would be a lot harder to do that there. But no, I do think you guys got a great one in Lynn as well. I mean, his dad was a tremendous coach for a long time in the NFL. I mean, he's still an offense coordinator somewhere, I forget where, but he's a great coach. Danton was a phenomenal player here, great leader on defense. I think you guys, even though Tom Allen may have been your favorite, I think Lynn will do really, really well with you guys.
So I ask everyone that comes on this question, and so I'm not going to let you off the hook either. So let's say this: you're scouting for SC, and you're going to go at that. You're going to go at now. I know you don't know much about Allen's defense, just based upon who you have, what you've seen this spring, etc. Where does USC attack this defense? Where would be? I know you guys have a lot of turnover on the line, corners, etc. Where do you think SC should attack to be successful?
I would be looking to attack the middle of the field with the passing game. Yes, Penn State lost those two guys at defensive end, but you bring back Abdul Carter, who's probably going to be a first-round pick this year. He's moved from linebacker to defensive end full-time, and he's basically just going to have the role similar to what LeVar Arrington was back in the day, similar to what they were going to do with Micah Parsons in 2020, of Abdul, just roam around, go kill the quarterback, do whatever you want, basically. You have Denai Dennis Sutton at end as well, who is a former 5-star guy who has flashed a lot in 2 years coming off the bench, and your defensive tackle room's like 5 deep. So I don't want to do anything where I'm looking to attack that line because it's not going to work. Your safety room, other than Ohio State's probably the best in the Big Ten. You lose a lot of corner, but you also have a lot of talent returning at corner. So if I'm looking to attack now, early in the year, I'm testing those young cornerbacks. But by the time this USC matchup rolls around in October, I think some of those guys have settled in. I would look to attack the middle of the field in this linebacking crew because Penn State at linebacker this year, as I mentioned, in Tom Allen's defense, that Sam linebacker is going to be more of a safety, and it's most likely going to be Jalen Reed, who very similar to Marcus Allen when he was here. Phenomenal run support safety, can definitely be beaten coverage though. Their Mike linebacker position, probably the weakest spot on the defense, and a will linebacker, they have Tony Rojas, extremely talented, a kid they beat out Georgia for in recruitment, but this will be his first year as a starter, so he's got a lot to prove. So I think on paper, your best bet is going to be to attack the middle of the field and try and put those linebackers in space because Rojas is a great athlete, but you leave a lot to be desired athletically at the Mike position. And again, with Jalen Reed is kind of the Sam safety hybrid. He's another one you can kind of expose a little bit athletically. So I think that's what you want to do. You want to get your playmakers in the slot, your tight ends, backs out of the backfield, whatever it may be. Get them in the middle of the field, attack these linebackers, try and get them in space and allow your playmakers to make plays. Because I do think this defensive line is going to be excellent. The safeties will be excellent. And while those corners may take some bumps early, I think once you get a couple weeks in, that cornerback room is going to be just fine because there is a lot of talent there, just not a lot of experience. And like you guys were talking, I caught a little bit of it before I joined in. If you've got talent, usually it's going to pan out, right? Even if not all the guys work out, you've got 3 or 4 guys you really like, odds are at least 2 of them are going to work out. You'll be okay. So that would be me. Attack the middle of the field, attack these linebackers, try and get them in space, moving laterally and try and expose that with your athletes.
See, did you hear that, Gabe? It's going to be Joey Olsen show. You watch. All right. Thanks, Marty.
Yep.
So the timing of this Penn State USC game, it's in the middle of the season. And, so sometimes you have a September game, like USC has a Michigan game in September, and on other occasions you play a team in your conference in November. So to me, it seems as though like mid-October is the time of year when there seems to be none of those has the coaching staff settled in, have the coordinators gotten on the same page. I think there's a purity about this USC Penn State game because of its placement on the calendar. Like I don't see any of those outside intangibles really entering into the conversation the way they do for Michigan. That's the Big Ten opener. It's still going to be fairly new for those two teams. There isn't going to be a weather factor in November. And I know that I'm sure there are plenty of Penn State fans that would love USC to go to Happy Valley in November, if that could ever happen. So there's a purity about this game. And I imagine Penn State fans share the same line of thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look where it falls in the schedule for Penn State, if you have to go cross country to play a team as talented as USC, it's a good spot because you play UCLA at home the week before, who, I'm sure you guys have no problem me saying this. UCLA is going to be terrible this year, so you should pummel them. And that's a big noon kickoff. So you then essentially have all day Saturday to start, prepping, preparing, and then, hopefully you can get out to SoCal, Wednesday, Thursday. Avoid the jet lag. I mean, it's a real thing. It's last year for baseball, we had to do a tournament out in Modesto, California, and flying there from the middle of Pennsylvania. Trust me, it sucked. And then you have a bye week the week after USC. So fall is a good spot for Penn State. And I agree with what you said, where by then it gives these new coaches on both sides time to really kind of settle in, gives your players, like the young guys like I talked about in the cornerback room, gives them time to kind of settle and get their feet wet. Now, luckily for Penn State, unlike USC, they don't have a trip to the big house beforehand. Penn State, if they're not undefeated coming into this game, that something's probably already gone haywire on the season with who they play beforehand. But yeah, and you mentioned the purity of it. One thing that I am very excited for is the first time USC comes to Happy Valley. And I know when the original schedule for this year had them at Penn State, this was the plan. Prime time, whiteout with two of the best uniforms in college football. It doesn't get better than that. So hopefully whenever they do come to Happy Valley for the first time, that will still be the plan, because you put those two uniforms, those two programs under the lights in a whiteout setting, like, man, that's like college football. It's absolutely, yeah, it really is a chef's kiss. It's at its best. And I just go back to one of the things I'm so excited about with the Big Ten expanding. The last time these two teams played, as heartbreaking as it was for me, that was one of the best football games I've ever watched in my entire life. What was it at one point? Like 4 straight plays from scrimmage ended in a touchdown or something like that. Like, it was just nuts. And it's just fun when you get these teams who are this immensely talented playing each other. That's what you're going to get. You're going to get a lot of awesome football. So yeah, I do think, like you said, fall's in a good spot on the calendar for that. Everybody kind of has time to settle in. And I'm sure that's going to be, I don't know who else plays that weekend, but I'm sure this will be one of the premier matchups and have a chance for college game day and everything of that sort to be there, which just kind of adds to it and adds to the excitement and that sort of thing.
Okay, I'm not going to lie, Marty. I still don't think I'm over 1993. when I saw USC go to Happy Valley, then I call it not so Happy Valley. That was the massacre that happened there that day. But what is it? So I've been thinking about rivalries within the Big Ten, because obviously as USC moves from the Pac-12 now into the Big Ten, thinking who could possibly be some of those natural rivalries. And Penn State's one of the schools, when you guys were up, especially in those 90s and rolling with Joe Pa. I mean, and then we had the other side of it when we had, Carroll towards Paterno's later years rolling. Is there any kind of, do you feel that? Because I'll tell you what, when I met the fans for Penn State, every time I've met Penn State fans, either on the street, here in LA, or when we're tailgating at Rose Bowls, I mean, you guys are great. It's kind of hard to get angry at you guys. What is the vibe about USC and these guys entering? I know you guys are late to the party a little bit, right? You've been here for a while, but you're not one of the original Big Ten schools. What is it? What is the atmosphere, and what is the feeling towards USC entering the Big Ten?
I think a lot of Penn State fans are excited for a lot of the same reasons you mentioned. You kind of look at it, Penn State and USC are two programs that are very similar, right? I mean, USC from a national championship perspective, obviously has had more success recently with the Pete Carroll run. But I think if you look at both programs historically, there's a lot of similarities there. They're both definitely two of your traditional blue bloods. And you guys will always have UCLA, but you mentioned Penn State kind of being late to the party in the Big Ten. We've never really had that true Big Ten rival, right? Maryland and Rutgers try so hard to make it a rivalry with Penn State, and then it comes out in the game 50-6 every year. And it's not. And Ohio State fans will never admit that them and Penn State are rivals. And I get it, because Michigan, but that's always kind of been the rivalry for Penn State fans. But a lot of that's been built around like, okay, as long as we've been in the Big Ten, Ohio State's been the dominant program. At least Daniel will admit it. As long as we've been in the Big Ten, Ohio State's been that program. That's the program we want to topple and take it down. And we kind of had that run there from 16 through 19, where it was just one instant classic after another between the two programs. And the last 2 years, they've kind of gone back, even though last year's game wasn't exciting. Still, one-score game came down to the end. Year before, one-score game that came down to the end. So I think that opening is there for Penn State with the rivalry, because even though a lot of Penn State fans would never admit this, because we like to make the little brother jokes and whatnot, ultimately our biggest rival is and forever will be Pitt, but we don't play them that often, and there's an opening there, and I would love for something to develop with USC, and, it would be great. And you mentioned the Penn State fan thing. It's funny because I hear that from a lot of fan bases that they have similar interactions with the Penn State fans, and I'm lucky enough that pretty much every game I've ever been to where I've interacted with other fan bases at Happy Valley, it's been similar. Those fans have been that way. And I'm sure part of it is because you're walking into a tailgating environment that isn't super hostile like some of the other places are. But yeah, I think that definitely is something that could happen. And it would be awesome if it did, because I think it's just, to me, two blue bloods, two great programs, two programs that, when they're humming, can hum along as well as anybody in the country. And if you can make that, like Penn State doesn't have that protected yearly rivalry. If that became USC, I don't think there's a single Penn State fan who would complain about that.
It was Iowa. Who has 3? Someone has like 3 protected. Mark, you could probably
Iowa.
help me. Is it Iowa?
Nebraska, Minnesota, Wisconsin.
Yeah, the old Big Ten West, I don't know if there was a single game that ever got played between Big Ten West teams where there wasn't a trophy on the line. Big Ten West schools freaking love trophies and rivalries. So, yeah, like Mark said, Iowa has those 3. Just it's a Big Ten West thing, apparently, where even whenever a lot of the West schools would play schools from the East, like Illinois and Ohio State play for a trophy. Like, why? I don't know. Michigan and Minnesota have the little brown jug. There's just something with those old Big Ten West schools always needing a trophy in rivalries.
Now,
Anything else? Go ahead, man.
Yeah. So, Mari, last season, there was obviously it wasn't fun, but it was memorable in that, Michigan did not throw a forward pass in the second half and was still able to win in Happy Valley. And then, of course, against Ohio State, you had that defensive touchdown and you're thinking like you have the upper hand and then it gets wiped out. In terms of, getting a sense from coaches, from players, which of those 2 moments or episodes is kind of like the bigger sequence of events that's kind of sticks in the craw and is kind of fueling this team as motivation to get it right this year? When players and coaches talk about how to turn this thing around and kind of having that fuel to be better, which of those moments stands out more for folks at Penn State?
I think it would be the called back touchdown against Ohio State, just simply because Penn State has been so close so many times. In 2017, they had a 14-point lead in the fourth quarter in Columbus and blew it. 2018, in front of the whiteout crowd, Miles Sanders scored with 6 minutes to go to put them up by 12, and they blew it. 2022, they took the lead at home with like 7 minutes left against Ohio State and blew it. And I think that was just another one, like, just here we go again. Like, if that play isn't, because it was probably the right call to flag that holding on Kalen King, but man, was it iffy. He probably held, but I just, with the ball not even in the air yet, I didn't like the flag being thrown there. And yes, Penn State's offense struggled that entire game, but Ohio State's offense struggled too. And they wound up getting 7 points there. That was a huge swing. If that swings the other way, and instead of coming out of that series, it's 10-3 Ohio State, it's 10-3 Penn State. Instead, Penn State's got the momentum. That defense is really going to be swarming. Who knows where that game goes? So I think it's that one, because the Michigan thing too, by the time that started, you kind of knew you weren't winning the game. The Ohio State game, you were in it to the very end for the most part. So I think that's where that one's kind of more that what if setting in the craw, because it's just like, man, if that doesn't get called back, who knows where that game goes? Who knows where that game goes?
And I just want to follow up, having established that, what's the mixture between aggression and complementary football for Penn State this season? Like, obviously last year you had that elite defense to lean on. What's going to be the mix in terms of entrusting your offense versus entrusting your defense to win games?
I'm hoping we see more aggressiveness on offense, and I think we will with Andy Kotelnicki. And to me, I've never understood, unless you're like Iowa, I've never understood the super conservativeness on offense when you have an aggressive defense. To me, my defense is that good. I'm going to be more aggressive on offense because if I make a mistake, I know my defense is going to bail me out, right? Hey, if I do throw an interception, if I do lose a fumble, I know you guys aren't giving up more than a field goal anyway, so let's do it. So I'm hoping there's more aggressiveness. I think there will be. I'm cautiously optimistic there will be. I am also totally prepared where if it goes like last year, in the first game of the year against West Virginia, they come out and they're just slinging it all over the place and ripping off big runs, and it's against West Virginia, and you're like, all right, here we go. And then you realize West Virginia's defense just wasn't very good. because they go to Morgantown to start this year. I think you could say, now I think West Virginia is a good team. I think they'll probably win 7 or 8 games, but lighting up that defense isn't going to be super telling. But I do think also, that can be a good test where, hey, first game of the year on the road, it's going to be a hostile crowd because Penn State and West Virginia that is a big old school rivalry, and a lot of the older fans were very excited to have this series back. So that place is going to, it's West Virginia. They no matter who they're playing in Morgantown, it's going to be 80,000 drunk people ready to go. So it's going to be a hostile crowd, but I think that's a nice test where you can test that aggressiveness, right? Hey, let's come out, let's be more aggressive on offense because I think you need to be. Again, like I said, I've never understood the mindset where if you have a great defense, to me, that's why you should be more aggressive on offense because the defense is going to bail you out if you make mistakes.
Tim, Matt, anything else from Marty?
No, I've picked his brain. Loved having you, Marty. I learned a lot. I love these because I'm as much listening in as anybody in the audience right now because excited, very excited. I think that, it just seems like there's a theme this year in the Big Ten. It just seems like a lot of us are breaking in new coordinators, some, like Michigan, bringing in also all new staff. Going to be interesting. A lot of turnover. I'm glad that you were able to tell us a little bit about the defense because that clears a lot of things up for me as well. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Marty Leap, Penn State Rivals. Marty, I understood from a conversation I had earlier today that Rivals is unveiling a new look. And do you have anything in particular over there that you'd like to highlight before we say goodnight?
Yeah, it's a new look. I like it a lot more. For example, just to kind of give you a spiel on how Penn State Rivals homepage now looks, you open it up, running across the top, you have the top events, so recent commitments, decommitments, things of that nature. And then you get the team rankings, our Penn State's team rankings, the commitment list, targets all on the side, and then the article. So it really kind of lays out everything you're looking for. In terms of content on the side, it's been an extremely busy week for Penn State. Recruiting wise, they've landed 5 commitments, since Saturday, and they're probably not slowing down anytime soon. So we'll have you covered on that front. Come over, read about the new guys. Huge recruiting win today over Oklahoma, actually, for a kid out of Texas that I did not think they were going to get. So come over, check it out. We'll have you covered with everything that has unfolded, with everything that's coming these next couple of days. And hey, yeah, we're not that far away from fall camp starting and the good stuff really starting to pick up on there.
Awesome. Marty, appreciate you hanging out with us for a long time here tonight and setting us up. Penn State, USC, like you, just the laundry on the field in and of itself is going to bring back all sorts of great memories, and it just reeks of huge, mammoth national game to me. Absolutely. Marty, appreciate you being here. You have a great night.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Mark. See you guys.
Thanks,
Have a good night,
Marty.
everybody.
Thanks, Marty.
All right. Yeah. Penn State and USC brought up that game in 93, Tim. Of course, there was the Pete Carroll blasting of a really good Penn State team, but just couldn't come anywhere close to USC. And the Trojans' last Rose Bowl win under Pete Carroll, a game that the scoreboard was kind to Penn State. It really wasn't that close. And there were a couple other times, Curtis Enos and company got together to take on USC. So, yeah, there have been some performances down through the years.
Yeah, those 90s games I can forget, believe me. I'm trying to forget those games.
How many 1990s USC games were memorable in a good way? Like you can count them on one hand.
Yeah, most of them involved Keyshawn Johnson.
I think one of my favorite ones was a game we actually lost against Florida State. That was at the Coliseum, not the one that was in Tallahassee. That one was just as brutal as what we saw. Talk about your defensive line expositions. Those 2 games, I want to forget. But USC, I can't remember if it was McCutcheon or Kelly. Had a pick 6. He had nothing but pay dirt in front of him, and that would have been a hell of a game to win. Unfortunately, it was not in the cards and sailed right through. So, but yeah, not many good ones. But Mark brought up that Rose Bowl over Northwestern. That was one of the few. Snapping that game, the game against Notre Dame, the 96 game, where we snapped that 13-game winless streak. I was on the field for that one. And then obviously the game against UCLA snapped that horrible streak as well. Yeah, the 90s were rough. Okay, that's fine. We'll skip the 90s. I'm good with that.
We will not skip a contribution coming in from Jackson Johnson. Jackson, we appreciate you being here. As always, you know that. One more week and USC is officially a member of the Big Ten. How does it feel, gents?
Can't wait to get my USC fix on Big Ten Network, baby.
Yeah. It was Robbie, it was a 95 Rose Bowl, 94 season, right?
95 season.
95 season, 96. Yeah, he's got me mixed up now. 96 Rose Bowl, right?
Yeah, that should have been an Ohio State USC matchup, but we won't go into that.
Yeah, just really quickly, just for fun, because we had this conversation and we might as well bookend this thing, right? Let's just take a look at the all-time USC recruits according to the recruiters. So we do that really fast before we get out of here.
Sure.
Be nice and fun. Let's see if I pull it up. So here we go. Make it bigger. No. So maybe you guys can see it better, but you got, so no arguing. Joe McKnight was a great player, but I'm not sure if he's the greatest ever. Rest in peace. But Matt Barkley, also a great Trojan, excellent Trojan, probably not the best quarterback. Then we have Corey Foreman, number 3, Whitney Lewis at 5.
And this goes back how far?
This goes all the way back to Reggie Bush time.
I think.
But
like
all Hazelton.
Okay.
Gallipo had a back injury, so that's not really fair to him. Craven stud. But then it's just Schweiger. I mean, it's hit and miss. Is all I'm trying to tell. That temper, you guys, how you get excited with the way these rankings go.
Oh, absolutely.
When you have the vast numbers, you say, well, look at with the percentage of 4 stars to 3 stars. Yeah, I fully get that. The percentage of guys that go from 4 stars, 5 stars, I get that as well. But I'm saying, when you look at your roster, you guys, and the guys who contribute on your team, go back and look at these rankings and see how they were rated, what vast majority of, because I mean, we can go down the list here of guys that just, we're all still in the top 20 guys that just washed out. Malachi Nelson never even got on the field for USC. Kyle Prater. It's just they have a lot of Max Brown above Reggie Bush. It's not a science. All I'm trying to say is, yes, I always start out by saying these guys do a great job. I don't envy their job. Trying to predict what a 17 or 18-year-old is going to do over a college career is very difficult. But at the same time, that's what I mean. It's very difficult. And the accuracy is not as laser sharp. Like, for instance, does anyone here on the panel know how many 4 stars there are? Hundreds, right? Like hundreds of them.
Yes.
So, and then you go into 3 stars, and then there's probably hundreds, if not 1,000 of them.
Yes.
And what's the difference between the guy who's 485 and the guy that's 165? People make such a big deal about these rankings. I don't know. I don't know what to tell people. I am not saying they're irrelevant. And in the chat, someone said, I'm saying 5 stars are irrelevant. I'm not saying that at all. Matter of fact, I've said many times in the past, it's not hard if you look at the film, the measurables and everything in these kids, to try to, if you put all that time into it, to pick the top 50 to 100 guys that are pretty damn good at that snapshot in college for the best you can project them based on the competition they're playing, etc. I don't think it's an easy thing to do. What I get worried about is when fans go, oh, it's another 3-star. It's like, if you want to look at the list of 3 stars at USC, I don't have the list off the top of my head that have been All-Americans. I mean, you're going to be able to do it. So relax on and understand this coaching staff, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I'm going to trust their eyeballs. I just really am going to trust their eyeballs. I think USC is competitive. Who USC is bringing in right now, sort of fine. You lose the big flashy guys that came in on the official visit. Thought it would be a cool idea to give a verbal commit, and then they pulled. And I'm not saying everything's rosy when it comes to what's going on in NIL at USC. I'm not. I think the real truth is where it was and where it is and where they're saying it is. I think it's kind of somewhere between. I think it's got considerably better. I still think there's some things they need to still iron out, and I think they're in the process of doing that. But with the coaching staff that we have, you're getting, Jakeem Stewart, guys like that are very interested in USC solely for the reason that they're being pitched development underneath Nua and Coach Henney. You guys need to relax, trust this group of coaches, and allow the process to go through. I think over the next couple of weeks, everyone's going to be very happy with the defensive recruiting class that USC is going to bring in.
Let me summarize it this way. Yes, nobody should be jumping off a bridge when a 5-star, 4-star, 3-star, any star, but of course it's going to be mostly 5 stars, are lost in a recruiting class, because nobody should be saying that guy's a surefire, that guy's a generational player, nothing like that. No particular player can you pinpoint as a 17-year-old and say, definitely he's going to be the greatest thing we've ever seen. So yes, the loss of any particular 5-star or high 4-star is not anything to get upset about, because we don't know what their future performance is going to be. However, in totality, let's say USC brings in the number 32 recruiting class in the nation this year. I will sit here and say, without knowing any names, that was a bad performance in recruiting. That is a bad recruiting class, because all we would have to do is go through history and go through all the number 32 recruiting classes, and it would tell you that's not good enough.
Yeah, I'm going to leave it point blank, because it always gets twisted. Everyone twists it. I'm not saying that there's no validity to the ranking system. I'm not even saying that people that do the ranking systems don't know what they're talking about. I will say there's a lot of bias. I will say there's a lot of politics in it as well. The guys that scratch their back, they kind of, I mean, you know there is. There's human nature as well involved in a lot of these things. Like, I enjoyed this, Mark. St. Clair had a great, very consistent job at the Elite 11. But Julian Lewis went in there on the second day of the camp and absolutely put on a clinic, scored 50 points on what they call their pro day, where basically the guys are running routes on air, but the guys got to hit moving targets, right? He scores 50 out of 50 points, which was led the entire field, tying the record set by CJ Stroud a couple years back. No one else had ever hit 50. You know what the commentators from 247 were talking about? Oh, he's kind of small, and the other guys are a lot more physical, look a little more physically, and I don't like the way he moves in the pocket. The dude just scored 50 and smoked everybody else, and that's what they're focusing on. I'm saying there's a lot of bias baked into a lot of this stuff. It's definitely, a lot of the guys do their best to make it what it is. A lot of these kids don't go to all these camps. You know, I think there's a lot of politics involved. That's all I'm going to leave it at. So don't get too bent out of shape if, you know, so-and-so is a 5-star, so-and-so lost his 5th star, he's a 4-star now. What the hell does that even mean? Do you know what I mean? Listen to what you just said. Oh, he's not as good because somebody in Tennessee believes that he's not a 5-star, he's a 4-star. He's not the 25th best player, he's now the 53rd best player in the country. What is that? We're comparing wide receivers to defensive tackles in this list of top 50 players. I think it's all really, if you know football, a lot of it is it's a lot of window dressing and very fun to do, but it's not really what it's baked to be, in my opinion. That's my argument.
And then the other factor that we've hit on a number of times is that we don't know, but we can assume logically that recruiting rankings and the totality of all these classes is less important today than it was 5 years ago because of the transfer portal. That's obvious. To what degree, we don't know, but that is definitely a factor. It's not as important as it once was.
That's a good point. Getting your foot in the door. Let's say a guy decommits from your school or goes somewhere else. They have that rapport with that coaching staff. And let's say it's a year down the road or 2 years down the road, they decide to transfer. They're going to remember that coaching staff, and that gets you, it may not get you the transfer, but it will get your foot in the door later on down the road. So it is good to keep, and I've seen that happen before with USC's coaching staffs, where they keep in touch with someone and down the road, that person comes back.
Matthew Miller, thank you so much for the contribution. Matthew hosts our Texas show on Monday nights. So please check him out there, 7 p.m. Eastern time. The lowest average of any school in terms of the total team composite Matthew's talking about was the 12th recruiting class. And again, that's 4 recruiting classes or maybe even 5 recruiting classes. So that's not just a class. That's the total team composite talent ranking. That was Clemson. That was the Deshaun Watson team that beat Alabama or lost to Alabama in the national championship, then beat them. the next year, of course. Prior to Michigan, I don't know what they were. It totally does matter.
Well, again, you've said it. I've said it. We've all said it. The way these things turn over now, the recruiting classes aren't really as important as they once been. Look at your own school with Matt. With yours. It doesn't matter where he goes out of high school. It matters where they end up. And by the way, you just named 2 teams. Clemson has been very successful, and Michigan just showed it. And there's a lot of ways you can do with roster movement that winning these recruiting battles aren't the number one sale. So
generally, the national champion though is a number 2, number 3 composite ranking. I can't wait to answer this one. I am so glad, DML, that you asked this question. I can't wait. 2024 NFL Draft. 5 stars. That's an amazing total. And I will explain, sir. 17 4 stars, 9 3 stars, and 1 2 star. Explain, Mark. Happily, I will. There are only 35 5 stars in every recruiting class, sir. More than 40% of them reach the NFL. Only 12 to 14 4 stars reach the NFL. 12 to 14% of 4 stars. The 3-star roster number for the 3 stars reaching the NFL, it's 3 or 4%. It's not even close. You are taking totals from a pool of 30 or 35 5 stars, a pool of 400 or 450 4 stars, times 4, because, we're looking at entire rosters of 4 to 5 years. And then the 3 stars, to Tim's point, it's like 12 or 1,400 players. There's a great video. I should pull it. Somebody sent it to me a few months ago. Somebody that I've never heard of did a masterful job of accentuating that point and why it is so astronomically
But is it? Hold on.
It is.
No, listen, hold on, Mark. Okay.
I'm going to find this video. We should play it on here. It is masterfully done to show you how astronomically higher percentage it is.
I understand the percentages, dude.
Wait, hold on. Than a 3-star.
Got you.
Got it. Even close.
I got it. But hold on. How many of those 5 stars in the first round are blue chip quarterbacks, wide receivers, and corners that were pretty much anyone knew out of high school were going to be going to the NFL?
Arguing the talent evaluation and the
legitimacy. So what I'm saying is cherry picking 5.
Results of the rankings come down.
I understand the numbers.
Accurate.
I understand the numbers, but you keep saying extremely accurate. That means that 29 of the 5-star can't miss guys didn't go in the first round. That everyone freaked out about when they didn't go to school.
Yeah, they went in the second round, the third round. 40-some% of them
don't get drafted. There's a good percentage that don't get drafted.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what I'm saying to you is there are guys like, for instance, I'll bet you right now.
Okay, if you do the numbers on how many people can actually make NFL rosters, you would realize that that's a high percentage. There's only so many spots in the NFL.
You can evaluate.
You can't take
look at the Elite 11.
You can't take 130 some rosters in college football with 100 plus players on each roster. There's like 14,000 college football players.
We're literally arguing about the same thing.
Into an NFL,
you're putting a different twist on it, and I'm going the other direction. That's the only difference.
League each year. There's only like 250 players from the college ranks that reach the NFL. You're going from this pool down to this pool.
What I'm saying, I'm talking more about the misses than the handful of hits that they get. And I'm going to say it again. You go to the Elite 11 last weekend, you're going to see 3 to 4 to 5 guys that are going to be in the NFL minimum out of those 11 guys. Okay. So then we say, okay, we're going to pick the best ones of those. So we'll take St. Clair and we'll take, whatever, just pick 4. I don't want to be called a homer. Pick 4 of those guys. Say, those guys are going to be first round or second round draft picks. That part's not too tough to do. And then pick the quarterback that goes to this school under this quarterback. Grab the defensive lineman to go to Alabama and to Georgia. Throw them in your mix as well. Now they're 5 stars. I mean, it's kind of easy to do the game. I'm sorry, it is a shell game. I think it's a complete shell game. There's so many busts. I showed you guys that list of the USC guys are the greatest USC recruits of all time. A lot of them are the best of the best of the best in all these classes. We never heard of production 1 from. I'm just saying it's not the science that some fans kick around. I'll go back to my first point again. There is validity to these numbers. They match up. The percentages are there when you look at a macro level. But if you grab 5-star guy, this guy, grab 3 5-stars, go, you got to land 2 of these 3 because 2 of these 3 of these guys is going to be in the NFL. No, they're not. The percentages aren't there. You can't, you go to, as a group, if you can grab 30 of them, then yeah, you're going to have probably 15 really good guys because statistically, those guys are first round draft picks. But who gets 35 stars? And then you get even more washy when you get to how many 100 4-stars are there? A couple 100 4-stars. I know. I just think a lot of it is overplayed. Sorry. And the teams, by the way, that get the highest rankings are the ones that usually win national championships. That's how you get it. That's how you fix the cards so you look legitimate, is when you start ranking the guys that go to, I don't know, Nick Saban and Kirby Smart. Let's make them talent. 4 and 5-star guys. Yeah, they jump up from being 3 stars to 5 stars because they went to Kirby Smart.
Again, I am not defending the expertise of the evaluators. I am telling you the final product is accurate.
And is this the final product?
How it gets accurate.
The stars we have right now, this is the final product. They won't be. They keep adjusting the stars all the way up until signing day.
Exactly, because it's a fluid situation. Players play seasons. They play their sophomore season, their junior season. They play their senior season. They go to camps. It's fluid. They get more intel. Guys drop in these rankings if they don't go to all-star games. If they don't go to camps, they drop them. Unless your name is Arch Manning, and then you don't go to any of this stuff, and you're still the number 1 player in the country. Yeah. But if other guys don't go, then they drop. The numbers back me up. And again, I am not.
No one's arguing it.
I am not promoting the expertise of the evaluation. I'm just telling you the final numbers, whether it's them.
You're arguing something I'm not arguing, Mark. You're arguing something I'm not arguing. When have I not argued the fact that the numbers, are what they are?
Pristine and perfect. Yes, there is the Charlie Strong, Texas Tom Herman program that botched and couldn't develop a bunch of 5-stars for 10 years. Yeah, so you need to do all the other facets of development and preparation, game preparation, in-game adjustments, build a culture.
Yeah.
You have to do all those things, but you can't do it. I've had morons call me and say, Mark, I'll take a team full of 3-stars that want to play at my school and I'll beat your ass. And I'll be like, no, I'll take Ohio State's 5-stars.
And who's making that? That's a straw man. I'm not,
you're a moron.
I didn't come close to making that argument. What I'm saying is, and it's going to come down to this one more time so I can state it for the people that are having trouble in the back hearing this. I'm saying that yes, some 5-stars and 4-stars are really good. And guess what? Many of those 4-stars and a good portion of those 5-stars ain't all they say they are. Argue that, and then that's my argument.
And I would also say, and this comes from Tom Luganbill, and it makes sense, that you cannot predict, you cannot evaluate to the nth degree a player's their engagement, their heart, who knows what kind of drug deal they're going to pull or knife on somebody 2 weeks from now, and then that derails their careers. It happens all the time. So we'd have to factor that in and say, well, that 5-star went off the rails. It had nothing to do with his football play or injury. Yes.
Yeah, and to be fair, some of those guys I showed on that list of USC guys, a very good, like Chris Gallipo is a good example of that, who hurt his back. So there are cases where you have a really good football player, they get an injury, they're never the same. I'm just going to reiterate one more time because I'm going to hear it in Twitter, I'm sure. There is a statistical number of situations that Mark's breaking down very well. Get it, totally get it. But even that, out of all the high school players, they pick just 40 of them, and half of them make that. What a great number. True, if that's just in they take and throwing blind shots at them. My point is they got a pretty good idea of who the top 100 to 150 people are, in high school. But remember, a lot of these guys cap out in high school. That their all-star game, Julian Lewis is a perfect example. The kid is 16 years old going up against 18-year-olds in these camps and being rated as a 16-year-old equally with an 8-year-old. And that's just the way it is. He decided to go ahead and reclassify and go this class. But I'll bet you his arm and it even gets taller and bigger over the next 2 years. And so the point is I really clearly stated that I don't envy these guys' jobs. I'm not even cracking on the services. I'm cracking on the fans out there that lose their minds over 3 stars, 4 stars. Oh, he's a 5-star, but he's a 3-star. Those are people I truly laugh at because 1, you're banking it on guys in high school. 2, they're going to get better with development. Like Mark said, you don't know if they're going to be better or if they've capped out their senior year of high school. Matthew, any day, Friday at 8 o'clock, come on over and we'll have a chat, dude.
And to Tim's point, and I say this all the time, and this will be the last thing I need to say on the night, would be that, yeah, if they were perfect, and again, we would have to take positions into consideration because they're not playing general manager for an NFL draft 4 years later. They are telling us who they believe are the top 35 players in the country, regardless of position. There might be 8 wide receivers and only 3 offensive linemen. The composition doesn't line up with what the NFL draft teams need 4 years later. But if it was perfect, they would be much more accurate. But I am amazed considering that the NFL counterparts have much more accurate data. They're dealing with fully mature or close to fully mature athletes at the age of 21, 22, 23 years old. The difference between evaluating 16 and 17-year-olds and their preparedness to play and how they're going to grow and develop both mentally and physically versus doing what their NFL counterparts, and the levels of competition are so fluid and so sporadic in high school football. You know, if you've got a gem of a player in the middle of North Dakota, he's not facing anybody who's anywhere close to giving him a challenge versus evaluating, hey, a bunch of players from USC and Penn State and Georgia and Alabama that are playing like competition and getting a read on them for an NFL and then all the background checks and everything that they do to follow through on that. I would think that the NFL draft process would be, I guess, bottom line is what I'm saying, much more accurate than it is.
And the 5 stars don't really, the 5 stars by state don't really match up with the number of players from different states playing in the NFL. That also, the disparity on that is also one that's been laid out many times before as well.
If I ever find this video, we should watch it. It's some fans sent it to me. I have no idea who sent it to me. I'll probably never be able to find it because it's lost in my DM somewhere. But it was well done. All right,
get this one.
We better not suck this year. Screw UCLA, yes, and CU.
I didn't read the whole thing. My bad. Yeah.
Oh, that's all right.
Thank you, Slap.
Me. Slap, appreciate it. CU, we're talking about Colorado?
Yeah, Colorado apparently is going to get Juju. It's a lock. They named a cheeseburger after Julian Lewis, and now they're going to being coached by Lincoln Riley or having a cheeseburger named after you. What would you do, Mark? Clearly a cheeseburger.
Yeah, because that will live, for ages as a
quickly. Who's the offensive coordinator at Colorado and the quarterback's coach? Anybody? Who's the quarterback coach at Colorado?
They fired the guy from Kent State, so I forget who they replaced him with. Yeah. All right, folks. It's another USC show. This one took us in a number of directions, but we appreciate Marty Leap stopping by from Penn State, and that should be a heck of a game in October. Tim Prangley, of course, and Matt Zemek do their work at Trojan's Wire, and they're back here on Friday at 8 o'clock Pacific time. Correct?
For anybody out there that wants to talk about the star rankings on Friday, feel free. Friday, 8 o'clock, USC channel.
Wait, when did we go to 8?
Sorry, 7. We swapped these. We've moved these shows around so much that originally this was the 8 o'clock show. I know, sorry, 7 o'clock, 10 o'clock Eastern. Come at me, bro. Let's have a conversation.
Man, anything we need to highlight at Trojan's Wire?
Waiting for some recruiting splashes, but frankly, the big story this week is going to be, where does Bronny James go in the NBA draft? So that's something we'll be on top of.
Very good. Tim and Matt, they are two of the very best, and they make this USC channel what it is. So my thanks to each one of them, of course, and thanks to all of you for showing up here each and every Monday. Join Tim and Matt on Friday night, and we will see you in the meantime at Trojan's Wire and right here at the Voice of College Football.